Hey folks, just a word of context about this week's episode. At a couple of different points, you may hear us refer to South by Southwest. Of course, we were recording this episode in advance of the festival's cancellation due to the coronavirus pandemic, so you can kind of ignore it and enjoy the rest of the episode.
This is the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network.
Welcome back to Horror Queers. We are talking about pink cocaine. We're talking rule violations. And we're talking random appearances by wolves. I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking about hunting season, so please wear your bright colors.
Well, this movie does have that in spades.
It does. It's a very bright, I wrote in my notes, this is very bright, and it's a compliment. I actually think the aesthetic of this movie is good. Everyone, we are talking The Ranger today, which some of you may be like, what is that? It's on Shudder, so go watch it, and then you can listen to us talk about it.
It's a film from a couple years ago. It opened at South by Southwest, which is one of the reasons we're covering it, because Trace, when this episode drops, you will be at South by Southwest.
Ooh,
yes.
Exciting.
Yes, and you hear her voice. So, ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between, we have a guest today. You know her as the creator, host, and producer of the horror podcast Girls, Guts, and Giallo, which examines subversive and controversial films from a queer femme perspective. Please welcome Annie Rose Malamet.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you for being here.
Digitally being here.
I know.
Yeah.
In my room with my cat.
I have my dogs in their crates right now.
Nice.
I just have wine.
Great.
I have coffee because I was really tired.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sucking on a vape pen, so I'm glad that you have the wine. I don't feel like the only one who's...
Let's all be rule violators together.
Yeah.
We all have our vices. It's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
Although the ranger in question would not be okay with that, so...
No, we would all be marked for death at this point.
Such a puritanical villain.
Yes!
Absolutely.
So I did review this for Bloody way back when, and we'll talk about this a bit more in a bit, but one of my biggest complaints with this movie was that they don't really take advantage of, like, the shtick that the ranger could have.
For sure. It's not campy enough.
It's not... but we'll dive into that maybe a little bit further as we go into it. But Annie, so this is I'm gonna call it a punk rock slasher film.
Yeah, that's fair.
Also, a trauma story that tries to be funny sometimes, but then doesn't other times. I don't know. Was this your first time seeing this movie?
It was, yeah. I had seen previews for it. I had seen it on Shudder. It looked like something that I would be interested in. So, yeah, but it was my first time watching it.
Okay, perfect. So this is my second and a half time watching this movie.
Because Trace fell asleep the first time he watched it, and then he had to go back and rewatch it a second time.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I'll address the elephant in the room. Listeners, so I teased this last week, but I really wanted to, I didn't want to discuss this movie because I don't particularly like this movie very much, but I wanted to talk about my experience reviewing this film and kind of the aftermath because I think it'll bring... I don't know. I think it'll be a good conversation. If it's not, then we're going to edit it all out. So
it's true.
You'll
if
never
you just
know.
hear a long then that means the Trace was super boring.
So, okay, let me take y'all back 2 years, almost to the day that I reviewed this film. So, Annie, have you ever been to a film festival? Have you ever, done any, coverage for film festivals before?
I have, yeah.
Okay, so at South by, and most other festivals, so you go see movies and you review them. That's cool. But sometimes for smaller films, you can reach out to the publicist and they'll send you a screening link. So you can watch them in the comfort of your own home. Usually in advance of the festival, it's really convenient so you can get your reviews out on time.
It's always my preference.
It's always the best.
Yeah.
So this movie I was actually not supposed to review back in 2018. I think there were 3 of us covering South by from Bloody that year, and we split everything up. I actually did want to review this because the concept of a murderous park ranger just sounded really fun to me.
Yeah, and we love a good slasher.
Absolutely. Who doesn't love a good slasher? If you're listening to this and you don't, please, we'll keep listening.
Don't turn it
up. But no, so someone else was supposed to review this film. And basically, I watched a screener for this film, and I got really, really bored. And about 40 minutes in, so the halfway point of the film, I fell asleep. Like, totally fell asleep. My husband, who was also covering that year, watched it, and he was like, it's not good. Don't worry about finishing it. So I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll finish it later. I won't prioritize it. So the person who was supposed to review this film messaged me and was basically like, hey, look, I've heard it's not great. It's a female director. They don't have distribution. I don't want to kick the film when it's down, so I'm not going to review it. And I was like, okay, so I guess we're just not going to review it. That's fine. That same day, my editor reached out to me and he goes, hey, blah, 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 like, doesn't want to review the film. Can you please do it? And of course, in my mind, I'm like, fuck. I tried to watch it. I fell asleep. I know I can't review it, so I've got to watch this fucking thing again. So I do. I watched this movie another time, and I give it a bad review. I gave it a 2 out of 5, and whatever. I think the reception for the film... Oh, actually, this is a good segue. So the reception actually was fairly positive. We're looking at a 76% of Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 6.92 out of 10.
How many reviews? Do you know?
I think it's like 30, to be honest.
Okay.
But that's still a substantial amount.
Yeah.
Yeah, for like a small film like that.
Yeah, a Shudder release specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're looking at a 76% based on 34 reviews, although your audience score is at 42% based on 88 reviews. So, that's that. I didn't think twice about it. I just let it go. I still didn't like the film. I pointed out that I liked the aesthetic, that I liked, certain things about it. I think the practical effects are really good, but overall I just thought it was kind of a dull film. So, flash forward, let's say 6-ish months, and I'm at a journalism industry party. And I see my friend talking to someone. And I walk over to my friend, and I'm like, hey, hi, blah, blah, blah. So I introduce myself to the person he's talking to, and this person goes, oh, I know who you are. And I'm like, oh, what does that mean? And they mentioned that they were involved with the Ranger. And, of course, I immediately am like, oh, shit. So... I'm a bit inebriated by this point, and basically this person tells me that, I shouldn't have released a negative review of a film that didn't have distribution yet, because it could have hurt their chances of distribution. I was told that my review was the meanest one they got, and then I brought up that it was a 2 out of 5. It wasn't like I gave it a 1 or an F or something. And they were like, no, but the verbiage in your review was very personal and mean and negative. And then this person also accused me of giving someone else associated with the film, that this person went into a depression after reading my review. And I was basically like, well, I mean, I'm a nobody. It's not like I'm not a named person. And this person follows up with, well, you may be a nobody, but the site you write for is not. And that's kind of what led into the whole distribution conversation. So that sucked a lot. And about a month later, it's kind of still bugging me, and I'm like, oh, like I want to talk about this with someone. Like, maybe I am in the wrong. I feel kind of bad. And maybe this is a bad idea in hindsight, and y'all can kind of talk me through this, because I don't really know. I made like a really long Twitter thread that was similar to what I just told y'all, but very anonymous, not mentioning names. I didn't even mention the movie. Just saying what happened, because I wanted to honestly talk about the distribution thing, because I have talked to other writers who also don't review films negatively out at film festivals. Not meaning that they'll like write a positive review even if they don't like it, but they'll just not review the film if they don't like it. So after I made this Twitter thread, someone else that knew about my situation started harassing me on Facebook, telling me that, they're going to release all the messages that I sent about how I fell asleep during the film. It's going to look really bad on me, and I'm an idiot, and I shouldn't have even posted anything, and blah, blah, blah. So that was that.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's
a full-blown saga.
It really is. So... It was basically like this person messaged me and goes, I'm sorry that happened. It shouldn't have, and I assure you I didn't know about it. But all that said, you shouldn't have posted that. It doesn't make anyone involved look good. Dude, you fell asleep during the movie. And I'm like, yeah. And I watched it again, like the professional fucking person that I am. And basically just, yeah, he's like, if people find this out, I'm going to have to release all the screenshots of everything we've talked about. Like, basically, it's going to make you look bad. People are going to think you're a sham or whatever. And I'm just like, I fell asleep and I rewatched it. I don't really know how that makes me look bad. Anyway, so that is my ordeal with this film. So to say I'm coming into it with a bit of baggage is probably an understatement. That being said, I did like it a little bit more in a second watch, but I did want to, like, just kind of discuss, because I understand where this person is coming from about reviewing a film negatively. Distributors read reviews. They might not pick up the film because of a review.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is two different things, right? One is the idea about whether or not you should or shouldn't give a negative review to a smaller film that doesn't have distribution, and, whether or not that impacts their chances. So that's one, and that's probably a valuable conversation to have. And then the other conversation is the fact that you more or less got bullied by somebody who felt you did something that they didn't like. They wanted you to feel badly about it, and then they tried to blame someone else's depression and mental health challenges on you, which is just unabashedly wrong.
Yeah, it's abusive.
I mean, I think honestly that's the thing that kind of got me the most. I mean, granted, when this altercation was happening, I was, again, inebriated, so I wasn't really in the right mindset to be like, what? And also, it had been about 6 months since I wrote the review, so I couldn't even really remember what my review was saying. And I went back and I looked at it, and, I still stand by most of what I said, but there were a couple lines that I was like, you know what? Maybe I could have rephrased that. The director of the film, Jenn Wexler, she produces a lot of horror films, especially indie films. She did this really, really good indie film from actually the same year, I think, called Most Beautiful Island, which was one of my top films of that year. Sorry, she produced it, didn't direct it. But I basically wrote in the first paragraph of my review that, this is her directorial debut. She knows what makes a good horror film, but unfortunately not much of that knowledge is on display in The Ranger, a dull and forgettable entry in the slasher subgenre. And then I also said at the end of the review, it may seem like I'm criticizing it for not being what I wanted it to be, but I would be okay with it being something different if it was good. So maybe those are a bit too harsh. I mean, whatever.
It's tricky because reviews are inherently subjective. As a critic, you try to be objective about the art that you're watching and sort of remove that. But at the end of the day, you're still going to put something of yourself into that. It sounds like there were a couple of lines in there that maybe could have been omitted.
Right.
Festival coverage is really hard because you're usually writing under the gun and you're covering a lot of films and you're watching a lot of films. Not that that's an excuse, but it's a factor that definitely plays in. I mean, I remember I had to literally rewrite an entire review because I was too spoilery.
Oh, I remember that.
People are complaining about this review. And I was like, yeah, because I wrote it at 3 a.m. My apologies.
Trace, where was this review published?
So it was published on Bloody Disgusting, and that's where both Joe and I write. And I get, if you're talking horror website, it's pretty much going to be like Bloody Disgusting, Dread Central. Like those are your, in my opinion, the two like juggernauts of horror journalism on the internet. Luckily, though, I mean, there was a second review that was posted to not combat mine, but just to be like, hey, Trace's is one opinion, here's another opinion that was much more positive, which is great. And I don't want to, I say I don't want to paint myself like a victim here. Maybe people will think that me even telling this story is me painting myself like a victim, but I just think it's a worthwhile conversation to have, not only, yes, about the distribution thing, but also about the interaction between filmmakers and critics, especially if it's maybe a critic who goes on to make films or do stuff with films. Because I do think there's a argument to be said where it's like, hey, you know what? I, as a critic, dish it out. I have to write good and bad things about films that I like and don't like. So I should also be able to take it if someone is criticizing one of my reviews. So that's kind of my conundrum with this movie. So, I mean, again, if y'all are listening to this, you don't have to take my opinion of the movie seriously because you may just think there's too much of a bias on my part.
Well, and you did fall asleep, so.
Yeah.
I think everything Joe said about how there's two things kind of going on here is really true. But I also think there's another thing going on, which is that there is an inherent friction in horror community and film community generally because of how maligned women filmmakers are and how they're just not given the same play, the same treatment at all. So I think that is, it's hard not to feel protective of that. I mean, I can tell you, like, as a queer woman, like, I was recently reviewing something I didn't really care for, and I hesitated to give it any kind of negative review because the person who I was reviewing is of very similar identities to me. So I felt a little weird about that. So I sort of gave a review that was very fair, but still very honest, but without without a lot of the qualifiers of like, oh, this is dull or bad, just kind of trying to be fair. But it was definitely a conundrum. Like, how do I do that? Because I also understand the position that we're in.
Yes.
Yeah.
I definitely think gender politics play a big part in this, because the person that did reach out to me to kind of like, threaten me with releasing screenshots, this person was basically saying like, well, what do you think the horror bros are going to say when it's like, oh, these women can't handle it and blah, blah, blah because of your story about this instance that happened to you? And I'm like, I get that. I do get that. But I also don't think that's entirely fair to lay on me. But it was so funny because I remember when the confrontation happened, y'all seen Drive Me to Hell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever the Lamia's coming forward, she's like, no, it was my manager, Jim Jacks, take him.
Yeah.
So when I was confronted, I was like, well, my editor asked me to do it.
Oh, no.
It's just not the right time to be bringing that up, is the other.
No, it's not professional. And even if it was some kind of networking event, like if there's alcohol involved and time has passed, like, no. I guess one of the other things, I feel like we can't have this conversation without also acknowledging the fact that, about a month ago, maybe give or take, depending on the timeline of recording this episode and when it drops, we're also coming off of a very public PR fiasco, personal fiasco for a director. Jason Lee Howden, the director of Guns Akimbo, very publicly went after two
completely
female
spiraled
women of color. I mean, there's a lot of issues in that, and I'm not going to try to talk about them here because to do so would probably be to give too little justice to the nuanced complexity of it.
Right.
But listeners, if y'all actually want to read about this, and this article was written by one of the women who was attacked by Jason Lee Howden. It's on Medium, is Medium just like a place where people can just go write shit? Like it's just like a journal?
It's like a personal blog.
Yeah. But if you just Google the article, Guns Akimbo was a movie of interest, ... until, it's written by Dark Sky Lady. That's her handle and everything. She basically details what happened. And it's a really, really interesting piece.
Yeah. The reason I bring it up is obviously because it was so public and it really spiraled, but it highlights some of the complexities that are inherent, not just around the relationship between film directors and critics or people who are, writing and working and talking about the industry and reception, but also the way that sometimes mostly gender and race and class, kind of come into those demographics, and just the ease with which something like social media can now play into and amplify the disconnect. I mean, I think in that case, there's a very obvious example of like, this is a director who completely fucking overstepped and
and was
deservedly was taken down.
Sexist. Yeah,
just absolutely terrible. There's like a pretty clear villain there, but the circumstances surrounding it, they're not black and white, but they do, I think, highlight the fact that there's an uneasy tension that comes when people are pouring themselves into their art, and whether that's filmmaking or whether that's writing about film, people are putting themselves into this, and then when other people have to come and be critical or be fair, as you suggested, Annie, there's still hurt feelings, there's still tensions, like at the end of the day, we're going to talk about The Ranger, and it's a film that we kind of get to see in isolation, like we're just looking at the product.
Right.
Whereas for somebody like Jenn Wexler, if you talk about this was
her baby.
Yeah, it's her baby. It's years of her life that she spent producing and marketing and preparing. So there's a lot to a film, even if sometimes we seem very flippant about them.
And we'll definitely talk about that too. I mean, I don't have a lot of information about like how this film was made, but Larry Fessenden, genre stalwart Larry Fessenden, had a big part in helping this get made, and he's actually he has helped a lot of up and coming like indie horror filmmakers take off. Like he helped Ty West take off, Jim Mickle, who did Stake Lamb, and so Jenn Wexler was one of his next people that he helped. Like he helped. I mean, he's in this movie. His production company Glass Eye Pix produced this movie, and You're right, though. I mean, I understand, it's someone's baby. It's easy for me as a, Joe Blow critic who is taking time off from his day job to go watch movies for free at a film festival and review films. Like, yeah, to be like, yeah, this movie sucked. I hated it. But I think, yeah, you're right. Like, am I thinking about, but like, what about all the people whose hard, like, blood, sweat, and tears went into this film? Is it something I'm thinking about off the top of my, like, immediately? No.
No, but you're never doing that, right?
No.
Even when I go to a giant monolithic Disney film, like, when I went to Frozen 2 and I had to debate whether or not I wanted to review it because I felt like it was kind of reductive and a sequel for cash-in purposes so that they could also win another Oscar for Best Song. Like, I could have written all of that and been glib and very satisfactory because I was taking down Disney, and at the end of the day I was like, you know what, I just don't feel like this is a valuable piece of criticism, so I'm not going to write it. But I could have just as easily written it. But on the flip side, there's still hundreds of animators and people who worked on that film. They rely on Disney for their paychecks. Like, that's what I mean by it's not so easy. But at the same time, as film critics, it's also not our responsibility to be like, am I hurting someone's feelings if I give this a bad review?
Well, the other part of this too is like, I often am frustrated by the fact that I don't feel like people give sincere reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like, because of social media now. I mean, I think that really did used to be less of the case.
Yeah.
I think because of social media, like, we're so front facing and constantly interacting with each other that I think people feel like, oh my God, I can't say that. But this person follows me, like.
Yeah. Or if I say this, I can get a pull quote on the Blu-ray.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, the things like that. And so I find it very important to keep giving your honest opinion. Then the other part of that, which is like, I can see somebody being upset with, is like, who historically gets to give the opinions.
Right.
Yeah,
And whose opinions get amplified. And, you know what I'm saying.
I mean, I am very fortunate, at least especially back then. I mean, I don't write as much for Bloody anymore, but I still do cover South by Southwest and Fantastic Fest. But I'm aware of the privilege that I have to be doing this, and we're in a time now where everyone is a critic. Like, everyone is writing and blogging and writing reviews and trying to make it. I mean, now movies on Rotten Tomatoes get 400 reviews, whereas it used to be like 80.
Right.
But even that's because of concerted efforts by Rotten Tomatoes recently to acknowledge the fact that they have historically only accredited white male film critics.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of those, as we talked about on previous episodes of the podcast, are also not genre outlets even, right?
Yeah.
So you get a bunch of fucking Owen Glibbermans from Variety reviewing genre films and saying that they're stupid. And you're like, well, maybe this film isn't for you, you fucking asshole.
Yeah, and that's why I think, somebody would get really sensitive about it being on Bloody Disgusting.
Well, admittedly, I do still stand by my review, but this movie made me angry because I hated these kids so much. So that's why it came through in my review, and I'm not defending that, I mean, again, like y'all said, I could have edited some of these things or like maybe reworded some things. But funnily enough, a similar thing happened with another movie that came out, I think it might have been it was the year before, called Game of Death, that also had a bunch of awful, shitty kids. And the screenwriter of that movie commented on my review and basically said he got a tattoo to commemorate the pain that my review caused him.
Oh my God. So dramatic.
Wow.
But and I think that the tone of my review was probably similar to the tone of my Ranger review, but honestly a bit meaner, so this guy was probably more justified. So, lesson for me, maybe just say what I'm writing before I post it.
Well, I mean, it's difficult. I don't, it's another thing. It's like, I don't know if this situation could have been avoided. Like, sometimes, we try to think in retrospect, what could I have done to avoid the situation? Sometimes conflict happens.
And sometimes it's not actually about you.
Right.
I mean, it may have been you and that review and other things, but it also might have just been like, you know what? I'm having a really fucking bad day. We've been trying to secure distribution for this film for ages, and then this didn't help. I don't think there's a right or a wrong here. You can look back and say, you know what, I maybe should have done some edits on this, but Annie, you're right. It may not have had any impact. The result may have still been the same. I feel like what we should take away from this discussion is that we're better when there's more diversity in terms of like reviewing and making films, so that we are at least able to acknowledge that there are lots of different opinions and lots of different art.
Yeah, like I think it's great that Bloody Disgusting posted another review.
Oh, 100%. And again, this review was very positive. It was from someone named Justin Yandel, and he really enjoyed the film. No, I mean, it's like, yeah. Sorry, I'm done. I'm good.
Good. Can we just talk about the fucking movie
Well,
already?
yeah. Okay, yeah. So luckily, this film did get distribution from Shudder. It was picked up by Shudder.
Mm-hmm.
Released August 17th, 2018. Runtime of, well, it's 80 minutes, but 77 minutes without credits. And, you know, just like Zombievers a couple weeks ago, God bless 77-minute runtimes. I wish more movies.
Yeah. Yeah. Can't say that this one flies by in the same sort of way, but at least it wasn't 2 hours long or something.
Ooh. Sorry, capping on your maybe this film isn't for you. This film I thought was going to be for me because it was a slasher movie with kind of a gimmick of the park ranger thing. But because it's punk and that's not a subculture or style of music that I'm very familiar with, maybe that had something to do with it. But we can discuss that as we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of the film.
Well, maybe, Annie, if you're comfortable with this, do you want to give like a quick primer on who these punk kids are?
Well, who these punk kids are in particular, I mean, punk is such a, you know, rich history, and it's got so many subcultures within it. I think it's so interesting to me that you were like, oh, I just hate these shitty kids, because I was like, that is punk kids. Like,
I know
they're angry and shitty.
and that's the thing. You know?
I was one of them. Yeah.
I'm a privileged white male person from an upper middle class family in the suburbs of Houston, Texas, and I'm a rule follower. I don't get a high out of like, you know, fuck the police or anti-establishment, and so watching them be like this, specifically in the scenes when they antagonize law enforcement, and I get that that's part of that, but it made me hate them. I was just like, y'all just shut up and mind your own business.
It's so interesting. It's not completely not something that bothered me about them at all. I mean, I think
Really? Okay.
I mean, I can relate to that very deeply as somebody who grew up in that subculture.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the thing that bothered me about it is I just didn't think it went far enough. Like, I feel like if you were going to have this group of punk kids who are like doing drugs, breaking the law, etc., I feel like they should be a little bit more punk rock. Like, I felt it was almost sort of like a simulacrum of punk. Like, I didn't feel like it was enough. I felt like it was maybe waffling a bit. They weren't bad enough.
Walking away from this movie, I don't have a much clearer understanding of what punk is. And now, is that the movie's responsibility to like walk me through that? Not really. But outside of the first scene, yeah, there's not really much here. And maybe it's because the aesthetic of the woods, you know, it's not really exactly a punk scene, but I don't know.
So when I was doing some research for this, I read a couple of different interviews with Jenn Wexler, and one of the elements that she wanted to highlight was when these punks are in their natural element, you know, they're tough, they're strong, they're very much in control. And then the minute that they start to get into the woods, she wanted them to really be out of their element, and therefore they start to kind of fall apart. They lose the elements of the punk that made them strong and independent and forceless to be reckoned with, because suddenly they're not in their natural environment. And you can see it reflected in some of the ways, like there's a lot of punk music at the beginning, and then that transitions into more traditional score when they get into the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So I like those kinds of elements, but I'm not gonna lie, Annie, I kind of felt the same way. Like, the film starts off so strong with like a really distinct personality, and then it just kind of feels like it doesn't come to anything. Like, the concept is great, punks versus an authoritarian ranger.
Totally.
And then it just doesn't...
It's not enough.
It just doesn't turn into anything. Like, that's kind of where it begins and ends.
I don't feel like I know the kids any better at the end of the movie. I could see, like, as somebody who deeply loves punk film and punk film history and punk culture and music, I saw all the references I felt like Jenn Wexler was going for. So I appreciate that. And I could see that there was a sensibility of somebody who's been in that scene and that subculture.
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't feel like it was enough. Like there's discord between the punks when they're in the woods. Not enough, like just push it further. Like so we're talking about a movie where like somebody gets their foot chopped off in a bear trap. Like if you're gonna do that, I just wanted it to be a more fighting, more discord, more secrets unveiled, more relationship trouble, like I wanted to know more about them. I don't really give a fuck about the ranger. Like I care about these kids. And then I felt also that the ranger just wasn't campy enough.
Yeah. Agreed. It's funny. I remember the whole film being very boring to me 2 years ago, whereas watching it last night, I was like, you know what? The first half of this movie, I actually was quite a bit into. I still, again, didn't love the kids, but I was captivated more so than I remember being. But what's weird is that once people start dying, that's when my interest started waning. And I thought that the last 20 minutes of this dragged so much. It's really frustrating. It's a frustrating viewing experience for me.
Yeah, and I would have liked it if like the punk music picked up at the end again, when we've got the final girl. Just like there just needed to be some stronger choices, some more like committing to that aesthetic, I think is what my problem was.
I think the screenplay is where a lot of my problems lies, because I think the film is shot well and directed well. I can't really comment on the music because I don't know shit about that. But yeah, I think it's really a lot of the screenplay is where my issue lies, which was co-written by Wexler and Giaco Farino.
They are college screenwriters, so they went to film school together, and apparently they had this as a film school assignment, and then when they both had to get real jobs, they kind of put it into a drawer and like shelved it for a long time. And then when she decided that she was going to make her directorial debut, she jumped back into this with him, and she said that she fleshed out the characters. But I think what ultimately you see in the final film is that she fleshes out Chelsea.
Yeah.
And none of the other characters really pop in the same way. I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to one other interview.
Yeah.
So she did an interview with Pop Matters, and I feel like this quote is really telling. She says, "For my first film, I wanted to make something that was overall a fun time, that feels like you were going on an adventure and escaping reality. But I also want to ground it a little bit with Chelsea and say something bigger through her story, and you are definitely on the journey with her." And to me, that's kind of the film in summation. It's two different films. One part is this overall fun time, adventure, and escaping reality. And that's the punks going and living in the moment and then getting murdered in fun 80s throwback slasher style. And then the other half is this layered, traumatic story about a girl who, spoiler alert, killed her uncle because she may or may not be a sociopath. And then she got groomed by this ranger.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense to me, also.
So did y'all think that there was like a sexual assault component in play between her and the
There's
ranger?
a sexual vibe at the very minimum.
Mm-hmm.
This is the other thing that didn't go far enough for me. I felt like it was a tepid rape revenge.
Yeah.
Like it was implied without actually going there, but not going there goes against the spirit of punk. So
yeah, there we go.
You have to, if you're going to do that, do it. I don't waffle on it, I think is my issue with it.
Yeah, there's so many moments in this film where you think they're going to punch it or they're going to hit the gas pedal, the accelerator, and it doesn't really come until that final confrontation, which happens in the last couple of minutes. But by then, I'm so disconnected, I just don't know that I care anymore.
Yeah. What was up with the... Okay, we'll get there when we talk about the plot.
I mean, we danced around it a lot. Should we jump into it and we'll go from there?
That sounds good. I mean, I guess I don't really have much about the production because I already said it. But yeah, I mean, basically, Larry Fessenden took Wexler under his wing, it sounds like, and helped this movie get made. And also, you telling that story about how it started as a college project means that this was carried around for years. And so the emotional investment in this property makes more sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not just a first-time film. It's something that she'd been thinking about for a very long time. Okay, let's begin. So we open with a shot fired. A young girl, played by everyone's favorite wonderkin, Jetty Laurence. People will recognize her from Pet Sematary, the remake. She is told about wolves on a rock cliff by a ranger, played by Jeremy Holm, and later he prepares a meal for her, but she's got a dazed, kind of mildly confused look on her face, like she's not exactly sure what's happening.
Should I talk about wolf theme now, or would you prefer that I talk about wolves
You can
later?
talk about it now. Yeah, go ahead.
Because it's all throughout this film, and I'll confess, don't really get it.
I don't
Okay,
either.
so, wolves are used a lot in horror to talk about untamed sexuality. And I think, in this case, I see it as kind of a Little Red Riding Hood thing.
Oh, ew.
Ooh, well, yeah, getting lost in the woods. And, a wolf, the Little Red Riding Hood story is a metaphor for rape, basically. A girl wanders into the woods and a wolf, keeps pursuing her. She's trying to get to safety. She gets eaten at the end, right? It's all a sexual, predatory vibe to the story. And I think that is what's being set up here, and I think why wolves are a theme throughout the whole film. It's got that nod to a Little Red Riding Hood theme.
I think it's also a little bit of pack, right? Like, he considers her a part of his pack because they have this shared history together.
Yes.
I wonder if the film, because he says specifically, like, no one will know, and I wrote in my notes, because honestly I forgot. I was like, was she sexually abused? And do you think the film is trying to use that as like a diversion to like make you not think that, oh, actually she just killed her uncle instead of being like assaulted?
I think so, yeah.
I don't know if that leaves a good taste in my mouth, to be honest.
Oh, I mean, there's no good taste to come from this, because we're either talking about she was sexually assaulted by the ranger or by her uncle, or she's just a killer. These are not good options.
Yeah, which...
Well, I think it's also kind of playing with the viewer a little bit because, like, we're so used to women and girls being sexually abused in film. And I think, that's immediately where our mind goes. So I think, it's an elaborate troll. It's like, oh, that's your assumption. Actually, here's what really happened.
Yeah. I think I just wish that it was a little bit more clear.
It's not clear
by
at all.
leaving it open to assumption, I feel like we can misread this. Not that everything has to be spelled out in black and white, but just...
But a film like this...
I'll confess, until we started talking about this, I didn't even consider the fact that she might have been sexually assaulted. I thought she was just a burgeoning sociopath.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's again, like, if you're going to go there, go there. I think is my... Yeah, it wasn't clear enough.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, they have this tete-a-tete. He doesn't want her to forget him, but that's when the authorities come calling, and we get this brief credit sequence, but really, this is setting up a recurring flashback sequence that will continue throughout the film.
Yeah.
But now we should move into the present day and go to a punk show.
This is gross.
What part is gross?
I just, like, the setting of this, like, club.
Oh my god!
I know.
You're so vanilla. This is like my typical weekend.
You're the first person to ever call Trace vanilla. That's hilarious.
No, it actually reminds me of a couple bars on the east side in Austin. East side's kind of like the hipster area, but it's a lot of houses that have turned into bars, like old houses, and some of which look just like this space. And it just like, yeah, it's, again, not exactly my scene.
Yeah, it's grungy, it's dirty, you definitely don't want to touch anything on the floor.
Gum everywhere.
You're probably puking in the bathroom.
Or doing this really chunky pink cocaine type thing.
Yeah.
No, because there's a point where, oh my god, Amber is like, just fingering the fuck out of it. And I was like, why is it so chunky? Are they not like bashing the rocks out of it? But then... Joe pointed out to me, he was like, well, I don't think it's supposed to be cocaine. It's supposed to be just like a generic drug because it's pink. So
yeah, that I didn't care for either.
Yeah, it seems like this is their own brand, and I'm using finger quotes right now that you can't see, but I don't know how these teams would have managed to come across 2 bricks of coke. So I always assumed that they were, cutting it with like a special thing and then turning it pink to kind of make it a little bit more playful.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, it fits nicely within the aesthetic of this film, where there's so much pink and neon colors. So
yeah.
I liked that visual aesthetic, but yeah, the Ugh, the amount of drug use that these kids are just casually doing as
God.
a mature
Guys,
adult.
you're making me feel bad about myself. This is like what I did when I was a teenager.
No. I
just worry for the kids. I'm worried about the kids. Are they all right?
I was not criticizing the fact that they were doing the drugs. I was criticizing the fact that the drugs didn't look good.
No, they didn't. It looked like shitty cocaine.
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
like,
There's baby laxatives all in that shit.
Yeah, I was like, oh, yeah. The way that they were like manhandling it and how chunky it was. Yeah, I was like, that's gonna hurt going up.
I'm trying to think. If I had 2 bricks of coke, like, yeah, sure, maybe I'd be a little bit flippant with, you know.
Yeah.
if I'm spilling some, like, whatever. I have a whole 2 bricks here.
To Trace, this is just a long weekend, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
This is a great weekend, yeah.
All I could think about was like, these kids are going to get nosebleeds and they are going to have 0 brain cells by the end of this.
Well, because we kind of get
They'll be
that,
okay.
though.
They'll bounce back.
We kind of get that, though, when Chelsea, she goes into like a daze. I'm always a fan of watching how films
film their drug sequences.
Yes. Like Midsummer did it really well with the shrooms.
Did y'all see Bliss?
No.
Oh, gotta watch it. I loved it. But anyway, Bliss has great drug sequences.
I've heard that, yeah.
Requiem for a Dream, just similar thing, but that uses more like editing than it is like the actual like film changing. Whereas so in this movie, you get like kind of a haze around Chelsea, and I was like, I feel like this is a different kind of high, which is why I was like, maybe it's not cocaine, it's something that's a bit more chill. I don't really know.
It was unclear.
She's definitely having some fun with this. So yeah, so we are introduced to adult Chelsea, who is played by Chloë Levine, and she is at this dive bar with her boyfriend Garth, played by Granit Lahu, or Lehu. And
he is the worst. Now, Annie,
he's a piece of shit boy.
You were into him, were you?
Okay, so I don't know how old they're supposed to be. Are they supposed to be like 16, 17? Or are they supposed to...
how old? I took them to be like 21.
Yeah.
Oh no, they're like talking about their parents and shit. Like one of the girls is like, "Oh, my parents are gonna be pissed." I thought they were supposed to be like 16, 17.
I do feel like Amber is a little bit younger.
Okay,
than them,
okay.
But she still needs to be old enough to drive independently. So presumably she's a minimum of 16.
Right. Okay. Well, anywhere from 16 to 21.
A 5-year age. Yeah. Whatever.
And I mean, I will say, like, as you know, I think every punk girl has dated like shitty punk guys like this, and every like I know I did. So, and I actually found that very relatable.
Yeah. Oh, everybody's had a Garth, right?
Yes, I think everybody, and I think that that's, you know, particularly funny in punk subcultures, because I think like punk straight men, you know, they think that they're like above mainstream masculinity because, you know, they reject it, and they have a certain aesthetic, and they believe in certain things, and you know, they believe in, you know, whatever, would it be anarchy or communist punks or whatever, like they have a certain set of values, so they think that they're above being sexist shitheads, but usually they're
Sexist
jocks.
Shitheads.
They're the jocks of their scene.
Ugh.
Yeah.
That's a great way to distill it down for us laymen's, though.
Great.
So also at the bar, we meet boyfriends Abe, played by Bubba Weller, and Jerk, played by Jeremy Pope. And essentially our introduction to these folks is that they are sitting around, they're doing these designer pink drug, maybe cocaine, bad cocaine. And
Joe's like, bad cocaine? What does that mean?
Yes, it's true. I sit up here in my ivory tower and I look out at the peasants and I think, what are they doing down there? Are they snorting chunky cocaine today?
Let them snort coke.
Yes, and then I'm decapitated. So Chelsea is fairly high. She's tripping. You know, we get a bit of a montage. She's peeing, she's dancing, she's spacing out. She chats with Amber, who is played by returning horror queers vet Amanda Grace Benitez, who we briefly talked about when we did our episode on All Cheerleaders Die.
And I will tell you right now, I didn't recognize her. I would not have recognized her. And it's not even just the blue hair. Like, she looks different in this movie.
Oh, I love that movie.
All Cheerleaders Die?
Yeah.
In that case, we're going to recommend you not listen to our episode on it. I mean, it's a hot mess, but it maybe could have its fun appeal to some people.
I love mess.
I mean, who doesn't? Yeah.
I thought you said I love meth, and I was like, oh, that's a choice.
That's what the drug is. I was pretending I didn't know, but yeah, it's pink meth.
Pink meth. Yeah. Ugh. I mean, I'm gonna have questions for y'all later when we get to the part where they inject it. Because what?
I've never
That's why
injected
I was
anything.
confused. I mean, I just thought they were doing heroin.
Yeah, but like it's also pink. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
like,
know. Yeah.
are they mass producing these various drugs in pink for this movie?
Yeah, that's 100% what it is. I mean, it's clearly a stylistic choice. I mean, I don't know how you would dye cocaine. I'm assuming you just use food coloring of some sort.
Probably.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Well, no, because they would get wet. I don't know.
It's so confusing.
Continue the story.
Okay. So at this point, the pigs raid the bar. So everyone has to haul ass out of there. And everybody mostly gets away except for Chelsea, because of course she is the one with the backpack full of drugs.
Yep.
So she is stopped by a cop. And before anything can happen, Garth shows up. They get into a tussle. And Garth stabs this police officer with his large knife. And at this point, Chelsea has picked up the gun and she briefly considers shooting the police officer, which then prompts a flashback. So this is how we know that Chelsea is also the girl from the opening sequence.
Right.
Right. So now that we have gotten away...
I will say, I like this first scene. I immediately hate all these kids. I mean, it really is a thing. But I like the setup here. I think it sets up something that's kind of fun.
And I like that the villains throughout the whole film are... some kind of authority figure. Like we have the police in the beginning, which obviously have like a huge history of friction with punk communities.
Yeah.
And then we have the park ranger who is like the policeman of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think, because this movie has an 80s aesthetic to it, do we think it's supposed to be like It Follows, where it's like a timeless thing, where it's like you don't know when it's taking place? Is it present day? Is it 80s? Do y'all have any idea?
It's a good question. I felt like it was supposed to be like evergreen. Like you don't know when it is, which is very popular, I feel like, in modern horror.
It's very true. Jenn Wexler says in a couple of the interviews that she's going for an 80s dreamlike aesthetic.
Oh.
So I don't think it's actually meant to be set in the 80s, but it's definitely evoking it, not just through the slasher, but also the look and the feel of it.
Right.
Okay, so these kids hit up a diner, and they're trying to figure out what their next move should be, because, of course, they're now wanted by the police, because they have assaulted an officer. And at this point, Garth continues to double down on his shitty boyfriend status by volunteering Chelsea's family cottage as a safe house. And she's very reticent to go there because this is where her uncle Peter, who is played by director Larry Fessenden, this is where he died, obviously, as we'll come to see.
They reveal things very slowly in pieces here, because she says he died, but then it's later that she goes, oh, he was killed. And then it's, oh, wait, I killed him.
Well, she never fully says that, but yeah.
Yeah. Do we think that she remembers killing him, or is it a repressed memory?
I felt like she killed him because he was molesting her. Did I just project that onto it?
I didn't
thought
get
that's
that.
what we were talking about.
No, I thought that the ranger was molesting her.
I thought both of them were.
Oh my god.
I know. I mean, that's what I thought was happening.
Taking it to some dark places here, Annie.
Yeah.
I don't mean to like make light of the fact that this girl may have been molested by one or two people, but yeah, no, I literally never even considered the fact that the uncle was molesting her.
I don't know. I mean, I just, again, it wasn't really clear.
You might be right, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that might have been the implication. Like maybe they were doing it together.
Yes, which is actually quite common. So
Yes.
That's why I was like, oh, that's what's happening. Yeah.
I'm going to choose to believe that, actually.
Yeah. I mean, that's what made the most sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
I mean, it certainly would explain why it's not just the fact that her uncle died there, but also it's like the dark cabin.
Yeah, and she has
Uncle
such a
died, she's
PTSD
there.
reaction to being there.
Yeah. Yeah, so she really does not want to go back to this family cottage, but of course, Garth is like, no, we gotta lay low, so they hop in a stolen van, and they begin to drive up there. And at this point, they discover that Amber has actually been sleeping in the van because it is hers, and she's totally chill with the fact that they didn't, wake her up, but also that they didn't leave her behind to get arrested. So cool, I guess.
No, that's very punk. That's very punk.
Just like go with
I
the
was
flow.
just like, Amber, you are so chill, girl.
Yeah, just go with the flow.
no,
yeah.
And this is also where she just starts casually doing drugs again.
No, but
It's but you just did so much drugs.
That was my thing, though. A, she should not be asleep. B, she's too chill for someone who is presumably doing a lot of speed.
Well, that's why it's like, what is the drug? yeah, that's.
There's too much uncertainty in this film.
Yeah.
We don't know if people have been sexually assaulted. We don't know what drugs people are doing. We don't have answer.
This is your screenplay right here. This is like where you go and adjust things and you add things and you remove things.
Yeah, that's the drug thing, and the reason I think we're hung up on it, and we might not be so hung up on it, it's a central part of the plot.
Yeah, like it really plays into the way that they're interacting with each other.
Yes, and what happens later. So it's kind of important for us to know those things.
Mm-hmm. So en route, they stop off at a local convenience store, and they shoplift liberally because the attendant is sleeping at the job. But this is where we get our introduction to the modern-day ranger. So he sees Chelsea in the store. He takes her outside. They have a confrontation with the rest of the group. Garth, of course, is trying to pose.
I guess, so yeah, this scene made me angry. This is what I was talking about earlier when I was like, y'all, just shut the fuck up, get in your car, and leave. However, if we're looking at it as he was molesting Chelsea, I think maybe this scene is easier for me to swallow.
Why is that?
Because he's a rapist. Mm-hmm. He's a child molester.
Yeah.
Oh, so you don't mind that they're challenging his authority because he's not a good guy.
Right. I mean, again, I don't like police. Like, I get really nervous around police and like security guards and things because I just like I could not do what these kids are doing. It makes me very uncomfortable. And then watching them do this, I was like, y'all are stupid. Just fucking go away.
Well, I mean, I think that there's also a certain amount of like braggadociousness to a straight male punk that other punk kids just don't have or live in more fear.
That's actually interesting that you bring up, you specify straight too, because we have the two gay punks here.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a ton to do in this movie. I appreciate that the film doesn't make
a big deal of it.
Gay! They're gay! But on another note, they just don't have as much to do.
Yeah, and I mean, that would have been cool to have them have more things to do,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would never call this a queer horror film just because there's two queer characters in it. I don't think it examines any queer themes or anything like that.
We've got to take our scraps.
Yeah, it's just they're just kind of there. I mean, the other thing about it is like, who are these kids? Because I'm sure Jenn Wexler, I'm assuming, comes from a punk background.
Mm-hmm, probably.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much diversity in punk culture, and usually queer punks hang out with other queer punks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of like, okay, and like punks of color hang out with punks of color or like other queer punks, like it seems a little bit like
it's like a hodgepodge.
It's a hodgepodge. Like, I just don't know who they are. I would like to know more about who this group of friends is.
That seems to be a complaint that we actually have a lot when it's a group of friends. Like, it's like, oh, I wanted to spend more time with them. Just even like a 5-minute scene of them just hanging out to just get the vibe that all of them had,
Right.
Which is funny, though, right? Because just to bring it back to the conversation we had at the beginning before we got into the actual film, if you're thinking about the typical notes that you would get from a studio, or in this case, probably independent financiers, I'm guessing if you're making a horror film, it's always going to be get to the next kill. Like, when are we going to get into the action?
Mm-hmm.
So it's tough for us as viewers because I don't care when these kids get killed because I don't feel like I know them.
We all know it's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, it's inevitable. They are literally just bodies.
Right.
Well, when we get to the kills, I will have things to say specifically about the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah. As one other side note, I feel like Amber is a very odd character in this because she gives me rave vibes.
I was literally just going to say she's like a raver.
Yeah, and not just because of the hair, like her entire attitude. Like, if she had have woken up and started sucking on a ring pop, I would have been like, yes, I know who this girl is.
Yeah,
100%.
just little things like that could have made it so much more of a world building thing.
I actually, that's why I'm glad we actually have you on this episode, because I could not watch this and say, oh yeah, that's punk, that's not punk, whatever. I do wonder if maybe, like, punks that watch this are putting it under like more scrutiny, because I feel like that's a subculture that's like, you know, you're proud to be a punk, you know, you have certain things, but you also have, like you said, all these different subcultures within punk. So
it doesn't sound like it's helping it though.
Punks would not be hanging out with ravers, but but I mean there is like crossover, like of course with all subcultures, but that could have been like a funny little element to put in there of like the friction between these punks and this raver girl. Like I could have seen that being really cute and played up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the friction in this film is between Chelsea and the rest of the group.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I found a lot of the time the interactions among the group, all I wanted to do was be like, these people are assholes, not just because their behavior is disrespectful and they're littering and they're, you know, going up against authority, but because they were going up against my female protagonist. Like, Chelsea is our audience surrogate. Like, we are attached to her throughout this film. It's very much her movie. And every time they act like assholes to her, I'm just like, why are you acting like an asshole to me?
I know, and it's also like, maybe this is me being like very naive, but I just feel like everybody else in the friend group, like it's two queer people and like another girl and like some asshole straight man. I feel like they would have been like, dude, fuck off. Stop talking to her like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I kept waiting for the gays to be like, no.
Yeah, any of them would have been like, dude, shut the fuck up.
Well, and also she's very clearly like shaken by even being at this cabin.
Yes.
And they don't pick up on that, which is again another reason why I don't like them that
terrible
much.
Friends.
Yeah, they're really bad friends.
They're not good friends.
But that's a good segue though, because then into where we are in the story, because they park and they have to walk just under a mile to get to the cabin.
Yeah, so they're partying, they're drinking, they're littering, they're smoking. As soon as they get to the cabin, Chelsea kind of starts to confirm, like, yeah, so my uncle's not just dead, he was killed here. And, you know, she asks them to keep the place clean because she, again, drops that there's bears and wolves and other kind of animals out in the woods, and it's not safe.
Which kind of pays off later, but not really.
No, I don't want... we'll get there.
Yeah, I know.
So basically, they just don't care. So at this point, Chelsea starts to break away from the group. So she starts going on walks. You know, later on, she takes a nap and listens to music.
And then Garth is in there, like, fucking smoking cigarettes. That's the thing. So, okay, anti-authority, whatever. But then he immediately turns against Chelsea because she starts being authoritative. And that's really frustrating to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, it probably is something that he would do.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that happening. I just don't see... I don't see queer people and like another woman being okay with that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Especially when he's the minority. Like, yeah, like get out of here. Yeah.
Well, and we never get any kind of catharsis. Like, so at one point, I'm going to start jumping ahead a little bit. Just because, you know, she goes off for a swim. She ends up having an encounter with the ranger that shakes her.
And it's rapey.
Obviously very rapey and sexual because she's just been
creepy.
swimming.
Yeah.
She's like half clothed and wet and But when she gets back to the cabin, she sees that they've been tagging trees and they've lit an open fire.
Ugh.
And she gets really mad at them, and they just act like, oh, Mom, don't be such a downer. It's actually a very good summation for all of the issues that I have with the way these characters are presented. But at this point, she gets upset. Like, she goes away, she comes back, and she starts to have a conversation. And this is where I'm like, okay, we're going to get some catharsis here. We're actually going to get these issues out on the table. We're going to get better insight into what's driving these characters and why they're at each other. And then this is when Amber gets shot. So we never get that. Chelsea never gets to actually process the way that she's feeling about anything to these kids. And I get that it's meant to all hide until the climax so that we can do the big reveal about why she's feeling the way she does. But like, I wanted her to get some kind of apology, or at least get on the table that like these people were assholes.
I mean, it is reminiscent though of an 80s slasher. Like this is kind of how it is. You know, you get your introduction of your ragtag group of friends and they all start getting killed off. I mean, there's not really much there. The problem is that this film seems invested in trying to get you emotionally invested in Chelsea's story.
That's the problem, because
Yes.
if you're thinking about a traditional 80s slasher, you're not really, like, you point out the final girl, but you don't really care about her backstory too much.
Exactly.
Well, you're not revealing she was maybe sexually assaulted and she's a budding sociopath.
I mean, it's
in
just...
the last act. Like,
right.
They don't do that to Nancy and Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, it's just not very well fleshed out.
And we have a 77-minute film. You know, you can do this in Zombieverse, but when they're trying to cram in all this stuff into 77 minutes, it just doesn't work. Like, I feel nothing for most of these characters.
I really bristle at, every horror film, like, trying to give the character this backstory. That's why I really loved the film Revenge. Did you all see that one?
Yes.
I love Revenge, and Trace is, like, lukewarm on it.
Okay, I love it.
Most people do. I'm very much like, it's fine, but I'm in the minority. Most people love it.
I love that the main character, right, I love that she really doesn't have a backstory, and you just become invested in her in this moment.
Yeah,
her
she's
survival
living in the
this
present.
moment. Yeah, exactly. And I think it would have been, I really want more space for women in film. This is why I liked Bliss. I really want more space for women in film to just be kind of shitty, just as shitty as men. And
Right.
I think it would have been cool if they were just kind of a bunch of shitty punk kids and like one of them is the final girl and like that's it. I just felt like a lot to try to put into an hour and 20 minutes.
Well, I mean, I think
Yeah.
the title of my review for this film was "This movie has an identity crisis," and that's that is its downfall.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think without the trauma, we might be getting more of what we're looking for, or we wouldn't be so critical of the fact that these characters are assholes because it would just be like, oh, well, they're just assholes and then they get killed and it's like a brisk slasher. It's
Yeah.
not trying to do more.
Okay, like people complain about the movie Unfriended. Have y'all seen Unfriended?
I haven't.
Okay,
Oh,
so
it's good.
it's really good.
I'll watch it. Yeah.
But here's the thing. It is a movie populated by utterly despicable characters. There is not a single likable character in the film, but it's not that deep. It makes kind of a statement on bullying and it works. But like it's the point of that movie is that you're waiting to watch these kids die. It's kind of like Final Destination, you know? It's like a fun little like sport. It's a fun time killer. Those kids not being likable doesn't bother me like it does in this movie. Because this movie's trying to do something different and make a statement.
Yeah, it is trying to make a statement. Yeah.
Yeah, I said the same thing to you, Trace, offline, that these kids remind me of the kids from Cabin Fever.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought the same
They
thing.
feel like
yeah.
kind of punk version of Eli Roth characters, but then because we have to fold in all the trauma and the backstory.
Well, but
Cabin Fever is successful because it's like you just hate them. Like
Yeah. And like the joke is that they're such assholes and then they just die. Like,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
is the
there's
punchline.
humor. There's humor in Cabin Fever, and I don't think this movie is particularly humorous, but I also don't think it's trying to be humorous.
No.
that was the other thing. There needs to be more humor because I don't know how familiar you all are with punk film, but humor is a hallmark of punk
Like
film.
Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah, like Return of the Living Dead is definitely considered a punk film.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of like Times Square, Repo Man, The Fabulous Stains.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of those films, there is a wry, very specific punk humor in them. And there was not that in this, which is
Well, no, because the comedy is only coming from the Ranger, and to be honest, it's
Not that funny.
he ain't that funny. Yeah. So
it's 50s Americana humor, and it's like it's one joke, and it gets really stale.
But
I thought it was like so corny and not
Well,
in a fun way.
it should have been more corny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, we get a lot of him, like, reciting park rules, but here's the thing. What this movie was missing to me, like, minus the bear shop, I guess, is missing park-themed deaths, which is why I like... Okay, so the way that the Amber getting shot is framed, I think it's a really cool scene. Like, because, like, you know, they're all freaking out, then he shoots the boombox.
Yeah, this is arguably like one of the best deaths.
Yeah, but like well, no, because she doesn't die here. Her actual death, I hate. But like, she's in the background out of focus, and you just hear the gun go off again, and like you see her head like twitch, and then she falls.
And you think like headshot, okay,
Yes.
here we go.
She should have died. It
Yeah,
would have
she
been
should have died.
so shocking
Mm-hmm.
if she just died then.
But then they just give her more drugs.
I know.
No, they carry her a mile, and then they give her heroin, and then she overdoses.
Well, this is the other thing that was really annoying about this as well, was that I don't know when this is set, but heroin has like ravaged alternative communities.
Mhm.
And the punk community in particular, like many of my friends have died from heroin overdoses, and it's
Shit.
very common. And I just felt like there was a commentary that was being made there that was not ever realized.
Oh,
And
like,
right.
huh. Which is strange because if she is so familiar with punk culture, you would
Right.
have thought that. I'm sorry, I keep saying she. Like, we should acknowledge this is a screenplay that was co-written by two people.
Yeah,
Right,
a woman and a man.
But you would think if they're familiar with punk culture that
I'm
they
sure
would
they
know,
are,
like,
and I'm that's why I think there was supposed to be, I think, that element to it, but it was never, it doesn't ever say anything in particular. And I was also just like, well, historically punk communities and queer communities are the ones that have pioneered harm reduction around drug use. So
Right.
it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense that they would be like, oh, let's inject her with heroin. You know, it was like, why would they think that? It was like very insulting to their intelligence.
I mean, again, if we're assuming it's speed, not heroin, then maybe the idea was, oh, it'll wake her up, like, so she won't pass out.
No, they said it was to relieve her pain.
Yeah, they clearly say they're trying to keep her sedated.
Oh, fuck. Well, never mind.
Trace, did you fall asleep again?
Man, it's a really hard movie to say like, paying attention to.
I mean, my big thing was just, it feels like we're pulling Looney Tune items out of a bag here, where they get back, the van's not there, okay. You know, we find out later what's happened to it, but at the time it's like, okay, magical. And then suddenly they just have a syringe full of pink something or other, and they're like, keep her sedated. And all I could think of was, what is happening? Where are these items coming from? How are they so prepared for this? Like, do people just carry syringefuls of drugs?
No, they do it there. They make it there on the spot.
Yeah,
so
like,
it
this
doesn't
isn't
make
something
sense.
you would have prepared hours ago. Like, I don't know. It was very confusing.
Well, that's why I'm saying, like, people who do drugs, like, yeah, of course people get irresponsible because they're living chaotic lifestyles a lot of the time, and they're, you know, they just like, I need to just get high, you know, it's whatever. But typically people who are doing drugs, you know, as a culture, we insult their intelligence, but like, they know what they're doing. Like, they know how to do the drugs. So, and usually they know how to do it so that they don't get sick.
Yeah.
You know, people are thinking about their deaths, like, just contrary to what people think. So it just all seemed very just out of time and place to me.
Yeah, a little bit like, okay, we've decided on this narrative thrust, so what are we going to do? Because we need to keep Abe in one location, and then we need to get other people away. So let's have them stay with the body.
I also think that would work if the tone of the film were a bit more over the top. And because it's not,
Yeah, it's
then
like
we scrutinize things
taking
like
a
that
middle
more.
ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Abe is left with Amber.
Yeah, so Abe and Jerk stay with Amber, and Chelsea and Garth decide they're going to trek up the mountain because, of course, she remembers at this point that there is a radio in the ranger's house, because when he met her outside of the lake, he reminded her that his cottage is up on the top.
Yeah.
So we've got two separate groups. Amber starts to OD, and they realize, okay, this isn't going to work. We can't wait for a car to go by, and we'll flag it down. So Jerk decides he's going to head to the convenience store to make a phone call.
I did appreciate, though, when Abe was like, please don't leave me. Like that, again, I felt something a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, I find the reactions to some of the events a little bit suspect, but there's moments like this that feel very genuine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's inconsistent to me.
Yeah.
So Jerk heads off, and Abe sees lights, so he flags down a passing car. It is, of course, the ranger who has heard them on the radio. And, I mean, in short order, he basically just shoots Amber in the fucking head.
Gun in your slasher movie. I mean, I get it. It's the ranger. He has a... Do rangers have guns? Maybe they do. I'm sure they do.
Do they?
Probably for wildlife, maybe.
Okay, I could buy that.
Sure, but like we've discussed this before, like don't fucking give me a gun death in your horror movie. That's such a fucking waste.
It just seems very odd to me too that he purposely, from all accounts, like from what we can gather based on the information we have, missed killing her the first time. Like,
Yeah.
he shot off an earlobe, which apparently like freaked her out so much that she passed out and they had to comatose her. But did he plan this so that they would have to bring the body out and then he could finish them off?
Yes, I'm gonna say
What is the plan?
he needed them to get to the road, and then he knew they would split out because he's smart.
That's a reach.
But
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I'm giving it way too much credit. But I will say though that this chase scene with Abe is set to like some synth music that's very reminiscent of The Thing. Like I do like this up until he gets into the bear trap.
Yeah, so
I thought the bear trap was the best death, but yeah, go ahead.
It is. Well, no, I mean, because in the way that when he gets in the bear trap, it's like a one single shot take where it's like on his face, it goes down his leg, you see it, and then it goes back up to his face to see him screaming. Again, it's well done. I do like that, but then after that, I'm out of it again.
Because this feels like the film is now starting to get serious, right? Like, we had the unexpected gunshot on Amber, and then we've got this unexpected bear trap with Abe. And then the ranger shows up, and he's once again doing his old-timey slapstick routine. He then starts a countdown, encouraging Abe to pull his own leg out from under the bear trap.
This effect is
which
good.
He somehow manages to do. I'm going to call
his
shenanigans on this.
Leg off.
And then the ranger is like, cool, I got the stump, and he just leaves Abe to bleed out.
Well, because he's also setting up a lover's, not a quarrel, but like a lover's...
reunion.
Yes, for later.
Yeah. Time is a malleable thing at this point because almost as soon as this happens, we cut to the convenience store where Jerk is making a phone call. We've got a weird Texas Chainsaw Massacre situation where he tries to place the call, but it ends up getting hung up on, so it's never clear that it went through.
Yeah. Dude, I actually wrote in my notes, this is the ranger, like, and this is kind of like Arlie Ermy in the Texas Chainsaw remake.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely heavy Texas Chainsaw vibes with the convenience store, all the scenes with the convenience store.
Minus the aesthetic, though, because this is a very clean and colorful convenience store, which, again, is part of the look of the film, and I get that.
I also had some issues with the look of the film. Like, I feel like it should have been grittier.
So, Joe, did you already say, I know you told me last night, but did you say in the episode yet that the aesthetic that she was going for was Lisa Frank?
No, I haven't mentioned that yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a combination of punk versus Lisa Frank. And if people don't know what Lisa Frank is, it's basically like a young girl's... What would we even say here? Like a merchandise line?
So Lisa Frank, she's
Annie, help me out.
She's a pop artist, and she became very popular. Her work became very popular in the 90s among young girls. It's very like pink and colorful and poppy, like definitely squarely in the pop art vein, and also kind of coming out of a pop punk aesthetic and being like liberalized and made into this kind of like girly girl power thing. So that makes sense that she would use that.
And in this convenience store, it's like flooded with pink lighting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, of course, during a key moment, so magically the ranger shows up here. He convinces Jerk to put the axe that he's carrying around down because, of course, Jerk is not Garth and he's not going to challenge this man. Mm-hmm. So the ranger picks up the axe. He ends up crashing into a gumball machine. So we get this interesting contrast of a super clean convenience store that's very... capitalist and very product oriented, and then we get a scatter of neon colored gumballs falling across the floor during our action sequence. I liked it, but again, it kind of felt like, oh cool, there's a pop of color, and then Jerk is just dead.
And the death is fine. I mean, again, it's just an axe in the chin, and it's like, I mean,
it doesn't go on long enough. It's not, I don't know, like it's not bloody. It's not, Again, like kind of like what you're saying, Annie, I wanted more. Like I wanted bigger, louder, more actiony.
Yes.
I don't know if these are fair criticisms to have against the film.
Well, no, but that's the thing. Like we're saying, oh, I'm mad the film isn't this. That's the age-old thing that we go across, Joe. Is like, oh, you can't criticize the film for not being what you wanted it to be. You have to criticize it for what it is. But when given a premise like this and an aesthetic like this, I do feel like it's still fair to be like, well, in my opinion, this would have made it better. This would have been a more successful route to take.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's saying she wants to make a punk film, so I think it's fair to criticize the aesthetic of it, and if it's successful.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like the film never really gets ramped up. Like even during these kill sequences, which should be main set pieces of this film,
yeah,
it just
the
felt like an
adrenaline
afterthought.
isn't spiking,
and that might be a budget thing. I mean, I'm sure this is an extremely low budget film, but yeah, that's like. It's not just that I don't like the kids, and so that's why I feel nothing when they die, but it's like, yeah, there's no spectacle around any of this. And maybe that's unfair as well, because like obviously not all deaths have to have spectacle, but given the slasher setting,
But that's what a slasher is. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, that's what a slasher is. And then what is with the part where she's in the cage and the wolf and the
yeah, let's fucking go to the climax.
Let's jump ahead. Yeah, so basically everybody is dead except for Chelsea and Gar. So they get up to the top of the hill, they break in, they discover there's no radio, so whatever.
Wait, I'm sorry. One thing really quick.
Sorry, yeah. Do you want to go back to Abe and
I just
Jerk?
want to say really quick. So Abe finds Jerk's, the top half of Jerk's body. It's kind of a prolonged shot where it's like he's like feeling the blood on the ground and then like gets to his body.
And like entrails or something?
Yeah, but then he gets eaten by a wolf. But like, again, budget thing. We don't see the wolf. We just see like the fur and like he like, it jumps on him. And I was like, okay, that's fine. The budget probably didn't allow for that. But then we have that last shot of the film and I was like, wait.
You do have a wolf.
You have a wolf! Anyway, so back to this cage.
Yeah. Again, that whole thing, I was just like, I didn't need this reunion between Abe and Jerk. It felt so needlessly unnecessary, and it protracts from what should be ramping up to the climax.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel a way about it? Like, did you feel like it was maybe kind of fucked up to have this queer couple go through this?
I mean, it is, but it wasn't like a queer themed death, Like had he like shoved something down his throat for like an extreme blowjob, like maybe I would feel more icky about it.
Yeah.
It's not The Town That Dreaded Sundown, where the gay couple who are like just trying to give each other head end up brutally killed by a trombone massacre.
Yeah, exactly. Or like there's a movie that we haven't discussed that we'll discuss at some point called 2001 Maniacs, where the gay guy is killed by a spit roast.
Fun.
Like,
yeah.
Not sexual, like...
Not a good spit roast.
But the implication is there.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, I get it. Like, I get what you're saying. It doesn't really, like... I just didn't care, really. I mean...
Yeah, I felt the same way. I didn't really care, but I was interested to know what you all thought.
No, I mean,
Well, I think the weirdest thing to me is that this is the only characters that get this extra scene, right? Like, it would have been easy enough to have just left Abe to die in the trap, right?
Yeah.
And instead, we get the scene where he actually meets his lover and they get a final caress in a way, which is something that even Chelsea and Garth don't get. She just discovers his body, but it's the climax and she's got to, like, get up to the top of that tower.
Well, maybe what this is trying to communicate is, like, this couple actually liked each other.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, then we have this bizarre wolf skin sequence.
What the fuck was that?
Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. So they're hiding in the basement because the ranger has come back unexpectedly. He literally fucking teleports all over these woods.
Yeah. But which I'm okay with, because that's a
slasher trope, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're hiding in the basement. They discover the caged bodies of all the people who have been missing. We saw posters in the convenience store for all these missing people. So clearly the ranger has been killing people for the entirety of the time that Chelsea has not been here.
Yeah.
Fine. He ends up knocking her out. He ends up shooting Garth. She wakes up and she is inside one of the cages. And he, the ranger, is naked in the corner wearing a wolf skin. Here's the thing. She is high. So this is not real. This is a hallucination.
Oh, it was a hallucination.
Because when she wakes up, he's already got the heroin, the pink heroin, and he's like rambling on and on about how he's going to get the city out of her by forcing her to confront this because he knows that she's better. But at this point, he's already administered it.
Well,
okay.
I did not get that at
Didn't
all.
get that at all. Yeah, I thought he was just... I was
It
like,
took me until
okay,
I
I was like, we have this one really strange moment. God, if only it had just gone down that road.
But this would support your belief that he has sexually assaulted her.
Yes.
Right.
Because whether this is a hallucination that she's having, or if it actually is potentially real, either way, the insinuation is that he's
the big
getting
bad
naked
wolf.
around her.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
She sees him as a wolf, as a predator.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she's either imagining that, or he just is kooky as hell and just likes to wear wolf skin.
Yeah, and to be honest, if he had have actually gone that path, because they try to suggest that he is super loony, right? Like, because even in the climax when she's beating the shit out of him with those binoculars and he's laughing, that's the kind of thing where, yeah, but maybe just have him still wearing that wolf skin.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like he's supposed to be such a lunatic. That would track. And you just
I texted
go
Joe
for
last night,
it.
and I was like, did he go crazy and start killing people after the uncle died, or was he always crazy and killing people, like, from the get-go? I was not clear.
I got the impression, and maybe I could be completely wrong, I got the impression that Chelsea escaped a very bizarre abusive situation, and that it's possible that they were always like that. Like, they were abusers and also murderers. I don't know. Yeah, it just is, it's unclear.
Again, the kitchen sink, it's a lot of things happening in a very short runtime.
Yeah.
And again, like, the assumption is that these woods are dangerous, right? Like, people have gone missing in them, presumably for quite some time. So it would be easy enough to speculate that the two men had set up the woods as their own private hunting ground. But again, all assumption because we're never given any kind of detail.
Yeah. Right, and that would have been an interesting element. And, I mean, it's just, and then, I'm going to get the city out of you. It's like that. There wasn't enough of that. It just comes out of nowhere.
And even with the way this ends. So, yeah, we get this, like, dinner table scene, which is whatever. Then
it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's what it is.
Right.
Sure. And then, she escapes. They run up Chekhov's tower, because we saw that earlier in the film. And, she just beats the fuck out of him.
Yeah, because he's almost trying to win her over to his side by admitting that she is like him, right? And the way to do that is to get her to tap into her inner rage. And it's interesting because I ended up spending a lot of time looking at the way that female critics reviewed the film, and this was the part that female critics really ended up responding to. This idea that this traumatized woman, just like a final girl, but also Annie, like a rape revenge, she finally fucking taps into that power and she beats the ever-living shit out of her oppressor, and she, overcomes in the end. And then there's the murky morals of whether or not, is she a good person because she also killed her uncle.
Well, because of the way that it ends, that's why I was like, she killed him because he was also a rapist.
And we get the kind of callback, because earlier in the film, Amber was saying, you just need to scream and howl and do it, and she didn't want to do it, so this is her finally doing that.
She's embracing it. She's embracing her wolf, which is then how the film ends. She wanders out into the woods. She takes away Garth's knife, so he's been tied up to a tree, and she takes away his phallus, which I also kind of enjoyed.
Yeah, it's your Carol
And then
Clover
she encounters a wolf in the woods and the film ends.
Yep.
Like, there's a lot of symbols in this, and there's an interesting potential commentary on rape revenge and what it does to women and how that changes them. But the problem is that it's butting up against this idea of a conventional slasher where teens went into the woods and they encountered somebody who didn't like the way they lived, and then they got killed for it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this film still doesn't... Like, I was hopeful last night. Again, the first half I was kind of into, and I was like, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I remember, and I was going to, bump it up a bit. Honestly, by the time the credits rolled, I felt the exact same as I did 2 years ago. I was like, I'm not interested in this at all, and clearly not a movie made for me, but it just didn't work for me.
Well, as somebody who I think it was made for, I still don't I hate to disparage because there are really cool things about it, but I just at the end of the day didn't particularly care by the end. I just didn't like everything I've said. It just wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough of everything to get me to care about it.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat. I feel like the two stories were at conflict with one another. I think I would have liked more of a revenge, as in the film Revenge version of this film, where it was mostly Chelsea working through her issues.
Right, kill off everybody at the beginning then.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you kill off everyone in within a 5 to 10 minute scene, and then boom, it's just Chelsea and the Ranger. But I mean, that's the thing, I think it's Chelsea and the Ranger for the last 10 minutes of the movie, and that's it.
It should be Chelsea and the Ranger for the majority of the movie.
Yeah.
I think that would be, and their conflict, and you could get more of his campy dialogue, talking about the city, and, he's going to cleanse her, or whatever. It could be, you just have to really go full throttle with it.
Do y'all want an uber serious version of this, or do you want a silly campy version of this? What do you think would be more successful?
Here's the thing. I don't like glib or obscure depictions of sexual assault, particularly against women. I find it really trite, and I'm fucking tired of it. So if you're going to include those elements or implied elements, I need it serious.
Right.
like Revenge doesn't have jokes. It has comedic moments, but the comedy is all tied to like men getting their due, like their just desserts in forms of like violent punishment. So I would be okay with that.
It does have that over the top element though, where like it's like, oh, she should be dead like at least 10 times in this movie, but she just keeps on ticking. But
that's the fantasy of it.
Right, for sure.
Well, that's why I find that movie so successful.
Me too. It's the part that Trace has the issue with.
I have an issue with it, but I need to rewatch it. I told Joe this before. I was watching that movie with my husband at Fantastic Fest, and someone had a seizure during the film, so they had to stop the film. I know. Someone had to stop the movie like halfway through, and like while they were getting this person out of the theater, my husband looks at me and goes, "I hate this so much."
Might have colored your experience.
It's so hard to sit next to somebody that you know they're not enjoying something, and you're just like, oh God, I'm feeling it radiating off of you right now.
And I felt bad because I actually convinced him to go see the movie because he actually didn't even want to see it to begin with. And I was like, oh, but I've heard it's so good. So I essentially dragged him to see it, and he was miserable the whole time.
I find it like I've seen so many rape revenge films. I love rape revenge. It's one of my favorite subgenres. I thought Revenge was like a really successful,
Me too.
a really successful new kind of rape revenge film. Because something I don't like about a lot of people who try to like resurrect rape revenge or exploitation films, period, is it doesn't update the genre. And it's just like the same shit. And that's what I like about Revenge is like, it's an update. It's a new perspective. And with this, I felt like the film didn't know if it was an updated 80s slasher or if it was an homage.
Yeah.
And it couldn't decide if it wanted to be funny or if it wanted to be serious. So it ended up being kind of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
it's just dabbling in a lot of different things, but then not giving us any one great version of something.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That sums up my thoughts exactly.
Yeah, and like, you know, I think like if you're going to have the sexual element in it, like I personally think you can still have humor, but I think, Joe, you made a really good point of like the kind of humor that it is.
Well, and that's why though Revenge, you have these are both films directed by women. Right. And I think that regardless of my feelings for Revenge, I mean, like, it's a 3 out of 5. Like, it's not, I don't dislike the film. I think it's fine. I just don't love it like everyone else does. But I think that's the perspective you need, you know, is someone who, I mean, not saying that men can't go through being raped. Obviously, that's not the case. But I mean, I
would love a male rape revenge film.
Me too. That makes me sound...
No, it's one of those things where I think, like, if a male director is going to make a rape revenge, I would love to see him tackle a male rape revenge film. And, like, try to work through that shit.
Right.
I mean, like, we covered Calvaire on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
That's
why I was going to mention that one.
But there's no revenge.
There's no revenge. There's just
it's
rape.
Like a rape and escape.
It's just rape.
Yeah.
Rape and pig fucking.
Yeah, I mean, that movie's really hard to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I would love that. I mean, I think that is something that hasn't been tackled. I mean, I think we need a queer male protagonist rape revenge film. Like, I would love that. But that's besides the point. That's not this movie, but it's,
right.
Yeah, it was not enough. Like, if you're going to make it rape revenge, you kind of have to say what happened. We have to, you know, the kill has to be sort of justified. Not that it's not, because he's a murderer.
Right.
But that's the rub of the rape revenge is like the graphic kill, the graphic murder, the graphic revenge is justified because of the sexual violence is so egregious.
Right.
Yeah. And here, like, if you're gonna try to suggest that the inciting incident, like, putting aside the rape revenge potential here, if you're gonna say, okay, it's punks versus authority, I don't know. I think you need to beef up the authority piece of it.
Yes.
Because here it just kind of seems like a bunch of low-key punks, like almost like a cosplay punk. They got the look right.
Yeah,
they kind of got the attitude right, but not really.
Yeah, they're not that. They're
just not that punk.
They're not that punk. Yeah, it's you know, I would have preferred like a punks versus authority horror film and have really gone very far with that instead of a mishmash of things.
Yeah. Okay, I know that we're starting to wrap things up. I feel like, can we just have a quick kind of 3-minute comparison between this and Green Room? Because I feel like that is the film that always gets brought up. Like, what I wanted to see was Green Room, and what I got was this.
Oh, interesting. I actually haven't seen Green Room.
Oh,
Okay.
shit. Okay.
So Green Room,
but you can spoil it. It's fine.
No. I mean, it's focused. It is a simple plot. It is a bunch of kids.
It's punks versus Nazis.
Yes. So they are in a band. They play a show at a skinhead bar, and they witness a murder, and they are trapped in the green room of the bar, and they have to escape. And that is the plot of the movie.
Yeah, but the kills.
They hit hard.
Patrick Stewart is killing it as like the totally chill leader of these white supremacists, and it's just really tense. But even like when you get to the final confrontation, it doesn't take place in the bar. It's like moved to a secondary location, but it feels like everything has just been slowly cranked up.
Yeah.
Like, we are finally going to fucking do this. And I think that's what I feel like is missing. This film feels like it starts so strong out of the gate. I'm wanting to be on its side, and then it just kind of feels like air is getting let out of a tire as the film goes on. Like, I should be getting ramped up, and instead I'm just kind of like,
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think the reason that films like Green Room, which I haven't seen, but I've only heard good things about.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I think I just haven't seen it because I'm like, I don't want to watch the Nazis, but I will watch it. But it's which I just said rape revenge is like one of my most favorite things, and I'm like, but Nazis.
Well, everybody's got a barometer. Like, some things you can take and others you can't.
Right. I think we the women in these films, what I think bothered me about this is like, I don't buy them as that badass. Like, not to disparage the actress, I just wish that as women that we were allowed to see like women who look different, and women who like aren't conventionally attractive, and women who are like muscular, or women who look like they've fucking been in a fight, you know? Like, I would like to see more of that, and I think that that's what I get frustrated with in horror films.
Yeah, I would have liked to see Chelsea as just like a bitch.
Yes.
And not have to become a final girl.
Exactly. That's what I wanted. I wanted just like this bitchy punk girl who just happens to be the one in her group of friends who survives.
Doesn't that minimize then the trauma that she experienced as a child, though?
Well, no, I think
like,
I
let's just
like
not do that if we're going to do this punks versus authoritarian thing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, like, I didn't care for the trauma storyline at all, so I wouldn't have it in there. But I also think it's powerful to have trauma victims who aren't these like perfect heroines on a pedestal. Right. Like, all kinds of people get raped. So I think it's important to show that. And I don't think I can only think of a few films that do that, and usually they're dramas. Like, they're not genre films. Genre films tend to be very moralizing about these sorts of things.
Surprisingly conservative.
Yes, and I would like to see, and like, I know I keep bringing it up, but that's why I really liked Bliss, is that the main character, you go with her on this journey, and she's a complete asshole, but you're still there on this journey with her.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, Trace, you and I, our homework is we're going to finally fucking watch Bliss, because we talked about it for ages and not watched it.
And I have to watch Green Room.
You're going to go watch Green Room.
Yes.
And then we'll reconvene here in a couple weeks.
Okay, well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've said all we can about this very short film. I mean, again, I wish it were better. I wish whatever. It's a film. If you haven't watched it, it's on Shudder, streaming for free. Well, I mean, for free. It's $5 a month for Shudder. But, yeah. So, that is The Ranger. And before we announce what we're covering next week, Annie, what would you like to plug?
So I'll just plug my podcast and some things I'm doing. My podcast is Girls, Guts, and Giallo. We talk about subversive, controversial, and sleazy cinema from a femme queer perspective. But recently I've been leaning in and just saying a Leatherdyke perspective, because that's really what it is.
Yes.
And I am a Leatherdyke. I'm in kink community, so I come from that perspective, and I'm a former sex worker, and I'm the host, I'm always there, but I have a different guest every week, and we analyze films. Yeah.
I gotta say, I have really enjoyed the diversity of films that you've been
I'm so
showcasing.
glad. Yeah, so it's not a lot of the time, because horror tends to be the most subversive or controversial genre of film. That's a lot of what I'm covering, but it's not just horror. Like, we've done Secretary was a movie that I did.
Ooh, I love some Secretary.
Yeah, I love Secretary. We did Caligula.
Oh, God.
Yeah, anything that is subversive, controversial, or sleazy. I usually have the guest pick the film, and then we just dissect it. And I'm doing a live podcast in April at International Miss Leather, which is a leather dyke event that's been going on for a long time in the Bay Area. Yeah. So, and currently I'm also lecturing on BDSM, representations of BDSM in film.
Nice.
That is very, yeah. Well, next time we have you on, we'll do something maybe with those themes.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I've done cruising on my podcast. I'm sure you guys have done it, I feel like.
So we have not. It's been one of those where it's on the list, but then we keep bumping it for something else, and neither one of us have seen it. So
I've seen it plenty, thank you.
Oh, sorry, I've never seen it, but people keep telling us to do it.
Yeah, I mean, we could always do cruising. Yeah.
Could always go cruising.
Well, Annie, thank you so much. We're very glad that you came on this journey with us.
Yeah.
And I'm going to close up with some of our housekeeping before we officially sign off.
For sure.
If you'd like to contact us listeners, you can visit our Horror Queers Facebook page or join our exclusive Horror Queers Facebook group. Tweet us at Horror Queers or email us at horrorqueers@gmail.com. If you have 2 seconds, please head on over to iTunes, and by iTunes I mean Apple Podcasts, and leave us a rating or write a review. If you want even more content, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/horrorqueers, where you can sign up for exclusive bonus episodes covering recent horror films like The Invisible Man. We have also got an audio commentary on Paul Verhoeven's Hollow Man to pair with The Invisible Man for all you $10 patrons. Joe, what are we covering next week?
Well, before I say that, I also want to say go buy a fucking t-shirt or a mug or something from our TeePublic store, because people said they wanted Horror Queers merchandise, and then like 5 of you have bought something. So come on, fuckers.
Hey, and thank you 5 people who bought something.
Yes, thank you to those, and the rest of you get on that.
The rest of you die.
The rest of you ungrateful people. No.
And you could, sorry, I didn't plug my social media. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Girls Guts Giallo. Simple.
Yeah, okay, so next week, Annie, you're going to like this because people can listen to your take on it and they can listen to our take. But next week, we're going to be talking about Vamp.
Amazing! Great.
And listeners, just a heads up, we are talking about the 1986 film Vamp with Grace Jones and Robert Wexler. We are not talking about the Amy Heckerling, Alicia Silverstone, Sigourney Weaver movie Vamps.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vamp, no S.
But yes, please come in for that. We've actually already recorded that one, and it is a very fun conversation.
Yeah,
that's a fun movie.
It's a very fun movie.
It was very fun. But yeah, so on that note, we can cross out The Ranger.
Cool.
Yes, and cross out Horror Queers.
Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network, home of creepy, disturbing, and terrifying creepypastas, SCP archives, weekly full-cast storytelling, horror queers, genre commentary from an LGBTQ perspective, and the Boo Crew, horror-centric interviews. Listen free wherever you stream audio and at bloodydisgusting.com/podcasts.
Get in, losers. This is the Lady Killers, a Feminine Rage podcast. I'm Jen.
I'm Sammy.
I'm Rocco.
And I'm May. Our podcast is a tribute to the female-identifying killers in horror and more.
Each episode will feature us, your Supreme Court of female murderers, discussing our favorite lady killers, from your Julias and Jennifers to your Carries and Christines.
We'll tell her story, decide if it's good for her horror, and answer the most important question of all: would we die for her?
Join us on Thursdays as we pull on our sweaters, snatch our ice picks, sharpen our scissors, and honor the lady killers who live on the silver screen.
No boys were harmed in the making of this podcast.
Yet.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.